The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital had never felt so cold. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in her former office, staring at the cardboard box on her desk. 15 years of her life reduced to a container that once held printer paper. Her hands trembled as she placed the framed photo of her daughter inside, cushioning it between her surgical journals and the worn coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Surgeon," a gag gift from her residents that now felt like a cruel prophecy. "You need to vacate the premises within 30 minutes, Dr. Mitchell." The hospital administrator's voice still rang in her ears from an hour ago, clinical and detached, as if she were discussing discharge paperwork rather than destroying someone's career. Cheryl Hartford sat behind her massive oak desk, fingers steepled, her expression practiced and perfunctory. She'd done this before. "We simply cannot have physicians who refuse to work within our operational parameters," Hartford had said, sliding the termination letter across the polished surface. "Your insubordination regarding the Patterson case leaves us no choice." The Patterson case. Joseph Patterson, 67 years old, homeless veteran, advanced sepsis. Sarah had found him collapsed in the ER waiting room 3 nights ago, burning with fever, his infected leg wound crawling with necrotic tissue. The ED wanted to stabilize and discharge him to a shelter, standard protocol for the uninsured. But Sarah had seen the blood work, recognized the septic shock setting in. Without aggressive surgery and days of IV antibiotics, the man would be dead within 48 hours. So she'd done what she was trained to do, what her oath demanded. She'd taken him to surgery herself, stayed 18 hours off the clock to monitor him post-op, and personally ensured he received the full course of treatment. She'd saved his life. And it had cost her everything. "You performed an unauthorized surgery on a non-admitted patient," Hartford had continued, her voice like ice. "You utilized OR resources without approval. You've created a significant financial liability for this hospital." "He would have died," Sarah had said quietly, her voice strained with exhaustion and disbelief. "That's not your decision to make alone, Dr. Mitchell. Healthcare is a business. We have protocols, budgets, stakeholders." "He's a veteran." Sarah's voice had cracked then, the professional facade finally breaking. "He served this country. He has nothing. No family, no home, no insurance. And I'm supposed to let him die because treating him isn't financially viable." Hartford's expression hadn't changed. "You're being emotional. This is exactly why we cannot continue your employment. Your judgment is compromised." Compromised. The word had hit like a physical blow. Her judgment, honed over 15 years of emergency surgeries, hundreds of saved lives, countless impossible decisions made in seconds, was compromised because she'd chosen a patient's life over a budget spreadsheet. Now, Sarah lifted the cardboard box and walked through the surgical wing for the last time. She could feel eyes on her, residents pretending to study charts, nurses suddenly very interested in their computer screens, fellow surgeons stepping back into doorways as she passed. The whispers started before she'd even turned the corner. Dr. Ramirez was the only one brave enough to approach. "Sarah, wait." Her old friend and colleague jogged to catch up, his face etched with concern and anger. "This is insane. We're filing a protest with the medical board. Patterson is recovering beautifully. You saved his life. They can't do this." "They just did, Marcus." Sarah kept walking, unable to meet his eyes. If she stopped, if she let herself feel the full weight of this moment, she would break down right here in the hallway. "Let me at least drive you home. You shouldn't be alone right now." "I need to walk, I need to think." She forced a smile that felt like it might shatter her face. "I'll call you later." She wouldn't call, they both knew it. The lobby stretched before her like a gauntlet. Sarah had walked through these doors thousands of times, rushing in for emergency cases, leaving after 36-hour shifts, arriving before dawn for scheduled surgeries. She'd been proposed to in the parking lot outside. She'd said yes, though the marriage hadn't lasted. She'd gotten the call about her father's death while standing near the coffee cart. She'd held sobbing family members near the chapel entrance, delivered news both devastating and miraculous beneath these same fluorescent lights. This hospital had been her entire adult life, and now it was spitting her out like a contaminated organ. The automatic doors slid open, and Colorado sunshine assaulted her senses. It was grotesquely beautiful outside, crisp October afternoon, leaves turning gold and crimson, the kind of day that belonged in tourism brochures. The kind of day that had no business witnessing the death of someone's career. Dr. Mitchell's Sarah. She turned to see Tom Chen, one of her favorite surgical residents, running after her. He looked stricken, his young face twisted with emotion. "This is wrong," he said breathlessly. "Everyone knows it. You're the best trauma surgeon in this hospital. You taught half of us. We're organizing, we're going to." "Don't." Sarah's voice came out harder than she intended. "Don't risk your career for me, Tom. Keep your head down. Finish your residency. Be the kind of doctor who saves people, not the kind who worries about saving themselves." "But you were that doctor. You are that doctor. And look where it got me." She shifted the box in her arms, its weight suddenly unbearable. "The system doesn't reward heroes, Tom. It rewards compliance. Remember that." She walked away before he could respond, before she could see the disillusionment settling into his expression. Another piece of collateral damage. The parking lot where her colleague had offered a ride faded behind her. Sarah kept walking, past the medical plaza, past the coffee shops where she'd grabbed countless emergency espressos, past the park where she used to eat lunch when she actually had time for lunch. Her feet carried her automatically toward downtown, toward the industrial district where the newer medical buildings gave way to older warehouses and vacant lots. Her phone buzzed incessantly, text messages piling up, job recruiters who'd already somehow heard the news, supportive colleagues sending messages they'd never say aloud in the hospital. Her daughter at college. "Mom, what happened? Dr. Chen texted me. Call me. Mom." Sarah silenced the phone and kept walking. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the empty streets. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the low rumble of aircraft from the nearby airfield. The industrial area was deserted, precisely what she needed. A rusted bench appeared like salvation, and she collapsed onto it, finally setting down the cardboard box. Her reflection stared back at her from a puddle, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a haphazard ponytail, still wearing her hospital ID badge like some phantom limb she'd forgotten to amputate. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, trauma surgery. Former trauma surgeon. She yanked the badge off and threw it into the box. 42 years old, unemployed, drowning in medical school debt, a daughter's tuition due next semester, a mortgage, a car payment, and pride, stupid, worthless pride that wouldn't let her beg for her job back even if they offered it. The sky was turning orange and purple when she finally noticed the sound growing louder. Not aircraft, something closer, heavier, more purposeful. The rumble became a roar, and the air itself seemed to vibrate. Sarah looked up just as her entire world was about to change. The two Black Hawks appeared from nowhere, massive and terrifying, descending from the sky like mechanical angels of war. The rotor wash hit her like a physical force, and her cardboard box tumbled across the pavement, scattering her belongings into the dust. And through the chaos and thunder, she heard someone screaming. "Where's the surgeon?" The world exploded into sound and fury. Sarah threw her arms over her face as the rotor wash became a hurricane, ripping through the empty lot with savage force. Dust and debris swirled into a blinding vortex. Her carefully packed belongings, her life in a cardboard box, scattered across the pavement like worthless confetti. The framed photo of her daughter skittered toward a storm drain. Her surgical journals flapped open, pages tearing free and dancing through the maelstrom. The two Black Hawks settled onto the cracked asphalt with predatory grace, their rotors still screaming, still churning the air into chaos. These weren't news helicopters or medical transports. These were military gunships, matte black, bristling with weapons, with door gunners visible in the open bays. The kind of aircraft that appeared in war zones, not industrial districts in Denver. Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. She'd been fired, she was having a breakdown. This was some kind of stress-induced hallucination brought on by shock and exhaustion. Maybe she'd fallen asleep on the bench. Maybe she was still in her office, and this entire nightmare day was just a terrible dream. Then the soldiers poured out. 6 from each helicopter, moving with fluid precision in full tactical gear. Helmets, body armor, assault rifles. They fanned out in a defensive perimeter, weapons raised, scanning the empty warehouses and desolate streets as if expecting enemy contact. Their movements were synchronized, professional, terrifying in their efficiency. One of them spotted her. Civilian, hands where I can't see them. Sarah's hands shot up automatically, her heart hammering against her ribs. She remained frozen on the bench, unable to move, unable to think beyond the primal fear coursing through her veins. What was happening? Was this some kind of raid? Was she in danger? Had she somehow wandered into the middle of a counterterrorism operation? A soldier broke from the formation, running toward her with urgent purpose. His gear marked him as an officer, captain's bars visible on his vest. He was young, maybe 30, with intense dark eyes visible behind his tactical goggles. In one gloved hand he gripped a tablet, its screen glowing bright in the dusty twilight. "Where's the surgeon?" he shouted over the rotor noise, his voice raw with desperation. Sarah's mouth opened but no sound came out. The surgeon, he was looking for a surgeon, here, now, none of this made sense. The captain reached her, his eyes darting between her face and the tablet screen. His expression shifted from urgency to confusion to something like hope. "Ma'am, what's your name?" Sarah Mitchell, what's going on? Why are you?" "Dr. Sarah Mitchell." He thrust the tablet inches from her face. On the screen was a photograph, her military ID photo from over a decade ago. Younger, hair shorter, wearing Army combat fatigues with captain's bars. A lifetime ago when she'd served in a field hospital outside Kandahar. "How do you have that?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "That's classified personnel records. I haven't been active duty in 12 years. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Alex Torres, 75th Ranger Regiment. We need you aboard right now. This is a national security emergency." "You have the wrong person." Sarah backed away, shaking her head violently. "I just got fired. I'm not even a practicing surgeon anymore as of 2 hours ago. I don't have credentials, I don't have privileges, I don't have." "You have level 4 security clearance from your time in Afghanistan." Torres cut her off, his voice sharp and commanding. "You have extensive trauma surgery experience in combat conditions. You have specialized training in thoracic procedures under field conditions. And according to our database, you're the closest qualified surgeon within a 20-mile radius." "Closest to what? What is this about?" "No time." Torres grabbed her arm, not roughly but with undeniable urgency. "We have a critical casualty inbound. Multiple penetrating chest wounds, collapsed lung, massive hemorrhaging. Without immediate surgical intervention, he's dead in 15 minutes, maybe less." The words triggered something deep in Sarah's brain, the part that had been trained, honed, and perfected over thousands of hours in operating rooms and battlefield medical tents. A dying patient, critical injuries, limited time. The rest of the world fell away, and she heard herself asking the question that mattered. What's his blood pressure? "Dropping, 80/45 5 minutes ago. He's deteriorating fast." "Oxygen saturation, 87% and falling. We've got him intubated and bagged, but the collapsed lung." "Tension pneumothorax." Sarah's clinical mind was engaging now, pushing through the shock and confusion. "Unknown, that's why we need you." Tor's eyes bore into hers with desperate intensity. "Dr. Mitchell, I understand this is insane. I understand you have questions. But right now, a good man is dying and you're his only chance. I'm not ordering you, I'm begging you. Will you help him?" Sarah looked past Tor's at the waiting Black Hawks, their rotors still turning, ready to lift off at any second. She thought about her scattered belongings, her termination letter, the administrator's cold voice telling her that her judgment was compromised. She thought about Joseph Patterson recovering in a hospital bed 3 floors up from where she'd been fired for saving his life. She thought about the oath she'd taken so many years ago. First, do no harm. A dying patient, that was all that mattered. That had always been all that mattered. "What are we waiting for?" Sarah heard herself say. Tor's face flooded with relief. "This way, move, move, move." They ran toward the nearest Black Hawk. Tor's shouted into his radio, "Package secured. We are wheels up in 30 seconds." Other soldiers converged on their position, forming a protective escort. Someone retrieved her daughter's photo from near the drain and pressed it into her hands as they ran. The helicopter's crew chief reached down, grabbing Sarah's arm and hauling her up into the cabin. The interior was cramped, utilitarian, smelling of hydraulic fluid and gun oil. Jump seats lined both sides, and medical equipment was strapped down in the center. Tor's climbed in behind her, slamming the door shut. "Go, go, go," he shouted to the pilots. The engine pitch changed. The Black Hawk lifted off the ground, and Sarah's stomach dropped as they rose rapidly into the darkening sky. Through the window, she watched her cardboard box shrinking below, her scattered life disappearing into the dust. She clutched her daughter's photo and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to understand how she'd gone from fired and walking home to flying through the Colorado twilight in a military gunship toward an unknown casualty with injuries that would likely kill him before she ever got there. Tor's pressed a headset into her hands. "Put this on. We need to brief you en route." Sarah's fingers fumbled with the headset, finally getting it positioned. Static crackled in her ears, then Tor's voice came through crystal clear. "Dr. Mitchell, the patient you're about to treat is Colonel James Reeves. Does that name mean anything to you?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. Everyone in military medicine knew that name. Colonel James Reeves commanded the most classified counterterrorism unit in the United States military. The man who'd stopped the Chicago subway bombing. The operative who'd dismantled 3 terror cells in 18 months. The ghost who didn't officially exist but whose legend was whispered about in VA hospitals and military bases across the country. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "Yeah," Tor said grimly. "So you understand, he can't die. He absolutely cannot die. The operation he's running right now is the only thing standing between this country and a coordinated domestic attack. If we lose him, we lose everything." The Black Hawk banked hard, accelerating toward the mountains. Through the window, Sarah could see the second helicopter matching their course, flying in tight formation. No pressure, she thought hysterically. Just save the most important soldier in America with limited equipment in a makeshift field hospital after being fired for caring too much. Torres pulled up a medical file on his tablet. "His vitals are here. Injury report, everything we have." Sarah took the tablet with shaking hands and began to read. With every line, her stomach sank deeper. This was bad. This was very, very bad. And in 13 minutes, she would be responsible for saving or losing him. The tablet screen glowed in Sarah's trembling hands, displaying information that made her surgical training scream warnings. She scrolled through the medical data as the Black Hawk screamed through the sky, her mind automatically cataloging the nightmare ahead. Patient REVESJ classification, REDSTD. Age 39, blood type, O negative. Injuries, multiple penetrating trauma, chest and abdomen. Primary wound, 7 cm laceration, left interior chest, foreign object embedded. Secondary, Suspected hemothorax, pneumothorax. Vitals T plus 47 minutes. BP 7540, HR 142, O2 sat 84%, temp 96, 2 degrees F. Sarah's eyes caught on one detail that made her heart skip. T plus 47 minutes. Time since injury. The golden hour, that critical 60-minute window where trauma patients had the best chance of survival, was almost over. They were racing against a clock that had nearly run out. "Captain Torres," she said into the headset, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "These vitals are 47 minutes old. What are his current numbers?" Torres pressed his own headset, speaking rapidly to someone. A pause, his expression darkened. "BP is 68/38. Heart rate 156. Oxygen sat is 79%. 79%. Sarah closed her eyes. The brain started dying at anything below 85% sustained. Every second counted now. "He's in hypovolemic shock," she said, her clinical mind overriding her fear. "That blood pressure means he's lost at least 30% of his blood volume, possibly more. The tachycardia is compensatory. His heart is working overtime trying to perfuse vital organs with blood that isn't there." "Can you save him?" Torres asked bluntly. Sarah wanted to say yes. She wanted to project confidence, to be the calm professional who'd performed hundreds of thoracic surgeries. But she'd also learned long ago that false hope killed just as surely as incompetence. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I need to know what foreign object embedded means. Shrapnel, bullet, how deep? Is it in the lung tissue, the chest wall, or has it penetrated the mediastinum?" Torres pulled up an image on his tablet, a field X-ray, grainy and dark, taken with portable equipment. Sarah studied it, her trained eye picking out the details. There, a bright white fragment, roughly 2 inches long, lodged in the left chest. It was pressed against the cardiac silhouette, that telltale shadow of the heart on an X-ray. "Jesus," she breathed. "That's lodged against the pericardium, maybe in it. If it's penetrated the heart sac, he could have cardiac tamponade, blood filling the pericardial space, compressing the heart." "In English, doctor." "His heart is being squeezed in a bag of its own blood. It can't beat properly, can't pump blood." She looked up at Torres. "I need to know, what kind of equipment do you have waiting? What's my OR setup?" Torres' expression told her everything before he spoke. "It's a field hospital, doc. We've got the basics: surgical table, overhead lights, suction, cautery. We have ONEG blood, lots of it. Medics with combat trauma training. But it's not exactly Johns Hopkins." "Chest tubes?" "Yes." "Thoracotomy tray." "Standard field surgical kit. Scalpels, retractors, clamps, sutures." "Imaging, CT, ultrasound." "Portable ultrasound, that's it." Sarah's mind raced through the procedure she'd have to perform. Opening a chest was brutal, invasive surgery, even in the best circumstances. In a field hospital with limited equipment, with a patient already in shock, with a piece of shrapnel pressed against his heart like a loaded gun. The mortality rate would be over 70%. But doing nothing, 100%. "Who's been keeping him alive so far?" she asked. "Sergeant First Class Rodriguez. He's our special operations medic. 20 years experience including 5 deployments. He's been running the whole show: intubation, IV access, blood transfusions, chest compressions when Reeves coded twice." "He coded," Sarah's voice rose. "He's already arrested twice." "Got him back both times. Rodriguez is the best in the business." Torres leaned forward, his intensity burning through the dim helicopter cabin. "Look, Dr. Mitchell, I know this is insane. I know you got pulled into this from nowhere, but Rodriguez has done everything he can. The colonel needs a surgeon now or we lose him, and if we lose him—" "I understand." Sarah cut him off. She didn't need the speech about national security or classified operations. A patient was dying, that was enough. Through the helicopter window, the landscape had transformed. They'd left Denver behind, climbing into the foothills of the Rockies. Below, she could see a sprawling industrial complex, old military buildings, huge hangars, abandoned airstrips. A relic from the Cold War, probably, commandeered for this emergency. One hangar had lights blazing from every window. "That's our destination," Torres said, following her gaze. "Hangar 7 will be wheels down in 3 minutes. 3 minutes to prepare for the most important surgery of her life." Sarah pulled up the patient photo on the tablet. Colonel James Reeves stared back at her, square-jawed, early 40s, gray at his temples, eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. In the photo, he wore dress blues with a chest full of ribbons. Silver star, bronze star with valor, purple heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. A warrior's resume. And now he was bleeding out in a field hospital, waiting for a surgeon who'd been fired that same afternoon for caring too much. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. "Dr. Mitchell," Tor's voice pulled her back. "I need to tell you something else. The operation that went wrong, the one where Reeves got hit, it's still active. We have a team in the field right now hunting the people who did this. Which means the people who did this might be hunting us too." Sarah's head snapped up. "Are you saying we could be attacked?" "I'm saying we have a full security perimeter, armed guards and air support on standby. You'll be safe, but you need to know the situation is still fluid." "Fluid," Sarah laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "That's one word for it." The Black Hawk began its descent, the nose tilting forward as they dropped toward the hangar. Through the window, Sarah could see vehicles scattered around the building, military Humvees, ambulances, and what looked like mobile command centers. Soldiers moved with purpose, weapons ready, creating a defensive perimeter. This wasn't just a field hospital, it was a fortress. 30 seconds, the pilot's voice crackled through the headset. Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking her watch, running through the mental checklist she'd developed over thousands of surgeries. Assess airway, breathing, circulation. Establish IV access, probably already done. Type and cross-match O-negative universal donor, they said they had it. Chest X-ray, already done, terrible quality but enough to work with. Get him stable enough for surgery. Open the chest. Find the bleeder. Extract the shrapnel without killing him. Close. Pray. So simple, so impossible. The Black Hawk's skids touched concrete with a jarring thump. The crew chief yanked the door open before the rotors even stopped, and Torres was already moving. "Let's go, Doc, he's inside." Sarah jumped down, her legs nearly buckling after the adrenaline and fear. Torres steadied her, and they ran toward a side door of the hangar where 2 soldiers stood guard. The door burst open, and a man in blood-soaked fatigues emerged, Sergeant Rodriguez, she assumed. His face was haggard, eyes hollow with exhaustion and stress. "The surgeon," he called out. "Right here," Torres shouted back. Rodriguez's eyes found Sarah, and she saw the calculation there. A woman, middle-aged, no uniform, no gear. She saw the doubt flash across his face before professional discipline took over. "Ma'am, we need you now. He's crashing." Those 3 words cut through everything else. "He's crashing." Sarah ran. The interior of Hangar 7 assaulted Sarah's senses. The acrid smell of disinfectant mixed with blood, the harsh glare of surgical lights, the urgent beeping of monitors screaming warnings. The space had been transformed into something between a combat hospital and a modern OR, military efficiency meeting medical necessity. But her eyes went immediately to the center of it all. The surgical table. The dying man. Colonel James Reeves lay motionless under the lights, his skin the color of ash. An endotracheal tube protruded from his mouth, connected to a ventilator that hissed with mechanical rhythm. IVs snaked from both arms to bags of blood and saline hanging from improvised stands. His chest was partially exposed, a blood-soaked trauma dressing covering the left side where the shrapnel had entered. Even from 10 feet away, Sarah could see he was dying. "Vitals," she barked, her voice shifting into the tone she'd used for 15 years in emergency rooms, authoritative, demanding, brooking no argument. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. BP 62 over 35, heart rate 168, O2 sat 76% and dropping. We've pushed 4 units of ONEG, 2 liters of saline. I've got bilateral large-bore IVs running wide open. Intubated on scene, bagged manually until 5 minutes ago when we got the ventilator running. Sarah moved to the table, her hands already reaching for the trauma dressing. Years of training took over, pushing aside the fear and impossibility of the situation. This was what she knew. This was what she was built for. "How long has he been this unstable?" BP started dropping 40 minutes ago. First arrest was at T plus 30. Second arrest at T plus 52. We got him back both times with compressions and epi, but he's not going to survive a third. Sarah peeled back the dressing and her stomach clenched. The wound was a ragged 7-centimeter gash in the left anterior chest, just lateral to the sternum. Blood oozed steadily, not arterial spurting, which was somehow worse. It meant the bleeding was internal, deep, possibly from the lung or the vessels around the heart. Chest X-ray showed the foreign body against the pericardium, she said, more to herself than anyone else. "But I need to see the wound. Rodriguez, tell me exactly what you saw when this happened." The medic's voice was steady, professional, despite the blood covering his uniform. "We were extracting from a compound in the mountains. Ambush hit us on the way out. IED followed by small arms fire. The colonel took the hit from fragmentation, looks like part of the IED casing. I saw him go down, checked the wound, saw the metal fragment still embedded. I started bleeding control, but I couldn't remove it without risking massive hemorrhage." "You made the right call." Sarah looked up at the team assembled around her. 2 younger medics, both looking exhausted but focused. Torres standing at the edge of the sterile field. And Rodriguez, who'd kept this man alive through sheer will and skill. "Okay, listen up," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is a penetrating chest trauma with suspected hemopneumothorax and possible cardiac involvement. Our priorities are: stabilize him enough to operate, evacuate the blood from his chest cavity, remove the foreign body without causing catastrophic bleeding, and repair any damaged structures. Rodriguez, you're my primary assist. You too," she pointed at the younger medics. "You're on suction and instruments. Captain Torres, you stay out of the sterile field but keep those blood products coming." "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. Sarah moved to the portable sink they'd set up, scrubbing her hands with betadine. No time for the full surgical scrub protocol. She had minutes, maybe seconds. As she scrubbed, she called out, "I need an ultrasound of his chest. Now, I need to see if there's fluid in the pericardial sac." One of the medics, his name tape read CHEN, wheeled over the portable ultrasound machine. Sarah dried her hands, pulled on sterile gloves that Rodriguez held out for her, and took the ultrasound probe. She placed it on Reeves's chest, angling for the subxiphoid view that would show his heart. The grainy black and white image appeared on the small screen, and Sarah's breath caught. There it was, a dark rim around the heart, fluid in the pericardial space. "He's got a pericardial effusion," she said. "Early tamponade. That's why his pressure is so low. His heart can't expand properly to fill with blood." "Can you fix it?" Torres asked from behind her. "I have to." Sarah set down the probe and moved back to Reeves's side. "We're doing a thoracotomy, left anterolateral approach. I'm going in through the 5th intercostal space, evacuating the blood, removing the shrapnel, and repairing whatever's damaged. Rodriguez, when I open his chest, his pressure is going to drop even further. I need you ready with pressors and more blood." "Standing by, Doc." Sarah positioned herself on Reeves's left side. Chen handed her a scalpel, and she felt its familiar weight in her hand. For a moment, the entire world narrowed to this: the blade, the patient, the choice between life and death. "Starting thoracotomy," she announced. The scalpel cut through skin and muscle in one smooth motion, following the curve of the fifth rib. Blood welled up immediately, and Chen's suction device whined as it cleared the field. Sarah deepened the incision, cutting through the intercostal muscles, feeling the resistance give way. "Rib spreader," she said, holding out her hand. Rodriguez placed the cold metal instrument in her palm. Sarah positioned the spreader between the ribs and began to crank it open. The ribs separated with a sickening crack, and suddenly she was looking inside James Reeves's chest cavity. "Blood, so much blood." "Suction," Sarah's voice was sharp. "Get this blood out so I can see." Chen worked frantically, the suction pulling away dark red blood that kept filling the cavity. As it cleared, Sarah could see the lung deflated, collapsed against the mediastinum, and there, lodged between the lung and the pericardium, was the shrapnel. A jagged piece of metal, roughly 2 inches long, its edges crusted with blood and tissue. It was pressed directly against the fibrous sac surrounding the heart. "Oh God," Rodriguez breathed. Sarah's hands were steady, her voice calm despite the horror before her. "The shrapnel has partially penetrated the pericardium. That's the source of the effusion. When I remove it, blood is going to pour out. Rodriguez, I need you to have your hand ready to compress the pericardium the second I extract this. Chen, keep that suction going. Tors, have 6 more units of blood ready to push." "Doc," Rodriguez said quietly, "if you nick the heart when you pull that out." "I know," Sarah's eyes met his, "but if I don't pull it out, he dies anyway. We're past the point of good options. We only have desperate ones." She reached for the extraction forceps, positioning them carefully around the visible edge of the shrapnel. The monitors beeped frantically, heart rate now 172, blood pressure 58/32. Reeves was minutes from total cardiovascular collapse. "On my count," Sarah said, 3, 2, 1. She pulled. The shrapnel came free with a wet, sucking sound. And the world exploded into chaos. Blood erupted from the pericardium like a crimson geyser, filling the chest cavity in seconds. The monitors screamed. Reeves's blood pressure plummeted, 50/28, 42/20. "He's coding," Rodriguez shouted. "No pulse." Sarah's hands moved on pure instinct, reaching into the chest cavity, finding the pericardium, feeling for the tear. "Start compressions. Push epi. Chen, more suction, damn it." Rodriguez's hands pressed down on Reeves's sternum, beginning chest compressions while Sarah worked inside the chest. Her fingers found the tear in the pericardium, a 2-centimeter laceration, blood pumping through it with each compression. Suture 30 proline. The needle was in her hand. She began to stitch, her fingers working blind, guided by feel and 15 years of experience. Each stitch had to be perfect. One mistake would make things worse. "Still no pulse," Rodriguez called out, continuing compressions. Sarah tied off the first suture, started the second. The monitor flatlined. A long, continuous tone. "No, no, no." "Colonel Reeves," Tor's voice cracked. "Don't you die, that's an order." Sarah's hands never stopped moving. The flatline tone was a scream in the metal hanger, echoing off the walls like a death knell. Sarah's world reduced to the bloody cavity in front of her, her hands inside a dying man's chest, working against time that had already run out. "Continue compressions," she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. "Push another epi, and get me internal paddles if you have them." "We don't have internal paddles," Chen's voice cracked with stress. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way." Sarah's fingers found the heart, surprisingly small, fragile, the most important muscle in the human body now completely still. She could feel it in her palm, warm and lifeless. "Rodriguez, stop compressions," Sarah ordered. "Doc, if we stop." "I said stop. I'm going to massage the heart directly. It's our only shot." Rodriguez pulled back and Sarah wrapped her hand around Colonel Reeves's heart. She began to squeeze, gentle but firm, mimicking the heart's natural pumping action. Compress, release, compress, release. She fell into a rhythm, feeling the organ respond to her touch, watching blood push through the chambers. "Talk to me, monitors," she barked. "Nothing," Chen said, his voice hollow. "Still flatline, no electrical activity." Sarah kept squeezing, kept pumping. Her arm began to burn with the effort, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Somewhere in her mind, she heard her old mentor from medical school. The heart wants to beat. It's designed to beat. Sometimes it just needs a reminder. "How long has he been down?" Sarah asked, still working. 2 minutes, Tor said, his voice tight. "Doc, maybe we should." "Don't," Sarah's voice was steel. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. 2 minutes is nothing. We have time. Rodriguez, give me atropine, full dose." "On it." Rodriguez's hands moved to the medication cart, drawing up the syringe with practiced speed. He injected it directly into Reeves's IV line. Sarah continued the cardiac massage, feeling the heart in her hand, willing it to remember its job. 15 compressions, pause, check. 15 more, pause, check. The monitors remained silent, that terrible flat line stretching across the screen like a horizon with no dawn. 3 minutes, Chen whispered. Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about cardiac arrest. The causes: hypoxia, hypovolemia, hypothermia, hydrogen ions, hyperkalemia, tension, pneumothorax, tamponade, thrombosis, toxins. She'd addressed the tamponade by suturing the pericardium. They'd given blood for the hypovolemia. The lung was still collapsed. Could that be enough to prevent return of circulation? "I need to re-expand his lung," Sarah said suddenly. "The pneumothorax is too severe. Even if we get his heart started, he won't survive without lung function. Rodriguez, prep a chest tube." "Doc, his heart isn't beating." "It will be." Sarah's voice rose, fierce with determination. "Get me that chest tube." Rodriguez moved without further argument, pulling out the drainage kit. Sarah reluctantly released her grip on the heart, her hand cramping from the sustained effort. She located the collapsed lung, found the pleural space, and made a small incision between the ribs. "Tube," she demanded. The hollow plastic tube was pressed into her palm. Sarah guided it through the incision, threading it carefully into the pleural space. Immediately, blood began draining through the tube into a collection chamber, dark, venous blood that had been compressing the lung. "Connect it to suction," Sarah ordered. Chen hooked up the system, and the lung began to slowly reinflate, like a deflated balloon finding air again. Sarah watched it expand, pink tissue emerging from gray collapse. 4 minutes, Tor said quietly. His face had gone pale. Sarah returned her hand to Reeves's heart, resuming the massage with renewed urgency. Compress, release, compress, release. Her entire world was this rhythm, this desperate attempt to restart a stalled engine. "Come on, Colonel," she muttered. "You've survived IEDs, gunfights, God knows what else. You don't get to die on my table. Not today, not ever." "Compress, release." "Doc," Rodriguez started. "Another epi, push it." "That's the 4th dose." "I said push it." Rodriguez injected the medication. Sarah felt it flow through the IV line, into Reeves's circulation, the powerful stimulant racing toward a heart that refused to listen. "Nothing." 5 minutes, Chen said, his voice breaking. "Doc, I'm sorry, but maybe." And then Sarah felt it. A flutter. So faint she almost missed it. But her hand was wrapped around the heart and she felt it. A tiny, weak contraction. Not a full beat, just a tremor, like a car engine trying to turn over on a cold morning. "Wait," she breathed. "Wait, I felt something." Everyone froze. The hangar went silent except for the hiss of the ventilator and the flatline tone on the monitor. Sarah held perfectly still, her hand cradling the heart, barely breathing, waiting, praying. Another flutter, stronger this time. Then, thump! A single full contraction. Real, unmistakable. There, Sarah nearly shouted. He's got a beat, single beat. Come on, give me another. Thump. 2 beats, Rodriguez leaned in, watching the monitor with desperate hope. Thump, thump. Rhythm establishing. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. I've got electrical activity, sinus rhythm, rate 45. The flat line on the monitor began to show spikes, slow, irregular at first but present. Present meant alive. The tone changed from that horrible continuous scream to individual beeps. Slow beeps but beeps. Beep, beep, beep. BP is back, Rodriguez called out, his hands on the arterial line. Barely, 52/30, but it's there. Sarah kept her hand on the heart, feeling it strengthen with each beat. 45 beats per minute became 50, then 60. The contractions grew stronger, more regular. She could feel the life returning, sense the organ remembering its purpose. O2 sat coming up, Chen said. 82%, 85, 88. Keep pushing fluids, Sarah ordered, her voice hoarse from the stress. He's still in shock. I need his pressure above 90 systolic before we can close. Doc, Torres said from behind her, his voice thick with emotion. You just brought him back from the dead. He wasn't dead, Sarah corrected, though her own hands were shaking now that the immediate crisis had passed. He was just, very temporarily not alive. There's a difference. Rodriguez laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that broke the tension. Very temporarily not alive. I'm using that in my reports. Sarah allowed herself one deep breath, then refocused. Reeves had a heartbeat, but they weren't done. Not even close. She still had to ensure there was no other damage, repair the lung injury, close the pericardium properly, and get him stable enough to survive the next few hours. Status check, she said, BP. 68/42, climbing slowly. Heart rate. 72, regular sinus rhythm. O2 sat. 91% and holding. Better, much better, but still critical. Sarah examined the pericardium, her sutures holding well. No active bleeding from the repair. She inspected the lung. The re-expansion had revealed a small laceration in the lower lobe, oozing blood. She sutured it carefully, her hands steady despite the fatigue setting in. More blood, 2 more units, she said, and start an epinephrine drip to support his pressure. As Rodriguez prepared the medications, Sarah worked methodically through the chest cavity, checking every structure, every vessel, every potential source of bleeding. The shrapnel had done significant damage, but miraculously it had missed the major vessels. Centimeters to the right and it would have severed the pulmonary artery. Centimeters down and it would have torn the heart itself. Sometimes survival was just luck. BP 82/48, Rodriguez announced. Heart rate 78, O2 sat 94%. Better, Sarah allowed herself a small nod. Okay, we're going to close. Chen, irrigation solution. Let's clean this cavity out before we seal him up. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah worked with meticulous care, washing out blood and debris, checking one final time for any missed injuries, then beginning the long process of closing. Layer by layer, tissue by tissue, bringing the ribs back together, suturing the muscle and skin. Her hands cramped, her back screamed, her mind felt foggy with exhaustion, but she didn't stop until the final stitch was placed and tied off. Done, she said finally, stepping back. He's closed. Rodriguez, get me post-op vitals. BP 94/52, heart rate 82, O2 sat 96%. Rodriguez smiled, actually smiled. Doc, he's stable. Stable, the most beautiful word in medicine. Sarah stripped off her bloody gloves and looked at her patient, truly looked at him for the first time since the surgery began. Colonel James Reeves, the ghost operative, the counterterrorism legend. Currently sedated, intubated, chest covered in bandages, but alive. His monitor beeped steadily, rhythmically. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of life. Sarah's legs gave out. She didn't realize she was falling until Rodriguez caught her arm, steadying her against the surgical table. The adrenaline that had carried her through the past 90 minutes evaporated all at once, leaving her hollow and trembling. "Whoa, Doc, I got you," Rodriguez said, guiding her to a metal folding chair someone had materialized from somewhere. "Sit, that's an order." Sarah collapsed into the chair, her head spinning. Her scrubs, borrowed scrubs, she realized, were soaked with blood. Colonel Reeves's blood. Her hands shook violently as the magnitude of what had just happened crashed over her like a wave. She brought a man back from the dead. No, she'd brought this man back from the dead. The most important operative in U.S. counterterrorism. A man whose continued existence might be the only thing standing between the country and catastrophe. And she'd done it in a converted hangar with field equipment, after being fired from her job that same afternoon. Here, Chen appeared with a bottle of water. "Drink. You've been standing for 90 minutes without a break." Sarah took the water with shaking hands, gulping it down. It was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. When had she last eaten? Breakfast. Had she even eaten breakfast? "Vitals are holding steady," Rodriguez reported from Reeves's bedside. "BP 96 over 54, heart rate 80, O2 sat 97%. We're going to get him transferred to ICU level care as soon as the transport is ready." "No," Sarah said automatically, her medical training overriding her exhaustion. "He can't be moved yet. He needs at least 2 hours of stability before transport. His body just went through massive trauma. Moving him too soon could trigger another arrest." "Doc, we need to get him to a real hospital." I said no. Sarah stood, her legs more steady now. 2 hours minimum. Monitor him continuously. If his pressure drops below 90, if his heart rate becomes irregular, if his O2 sat drops at all, you call me immediately. Rodriguez nodded, recognizing the authority in her voice. "Yes, ma'am." Captain Torres appeared at Sarah's elbow, his tactical vest removed, his face showing the strain of the past few hours. "Dr. Mitchell, there's someone who wants to speak with you. He's been monitoring the situation remotely." "Who?" "Major General Raymond Caldwell, JSOC Commander." Sarah blinked. Joint Special Operations Command. The general who oversaw all U.S. Special Operations Forces. The general who commanded the people who commanded people like Colonel Reeves. "He wants to speak to me, now." "Now?" Torres gestured toward a corner of the hangar where a secure communications setup had been established. Laptops, encrypted phones, satellite uplinks. "If you're able." Sarah looked down at her blood-soaked scrubs, her shaking hands, her complete lack of professional composure. She probably looked like she'd been through a war zone. Which she supposed she had. "Give me 2 minutes," she said. She moved to the portable sink, scrubbing the blood from her hands and arms with mechanical precision. The water ran red, then pink, then finally clear. She splashed cold water on her face, tied her hair back more neatly, and took 3 deep breaths. "You just saved a man's life. You can handle a phone call with a general." Torres led her to the communications station, where a laptop sat on a folding table, its screen showing the seal of the Department of Defense. He clicked a few keys, and the screen came to life with a video feed. Major General Raymond Caldwell appeared on screen, 3 stars on his shoulders, silver hair cut military short, eyes that missed nothing. He was in an office somewhere, maps and monitors visible behind him. When he saw Sarah, his expression shifted from stern concentration to something approaching respect. "Dr. Mitchell," his voice was deep, gravelly. "Captain Torres informs me that Colonel Reeves is stable." "Yes, sir, he's critical but stable. The next 48 hours will be crucial for." "You brought him back after 5 minutes of cardiac arrest." "Yes, sir." "With field equipment in a converted hangar." "Yes, sir." Caldwell leaned back in his chair, studying her through the screen. Captain Torres also tells me you were pulled off a park bench 2 hours ago, that you were walking home after being terminated from your position at St. Catherine's Hospital. Sarah's stomach dropped. Of course they'd investigated her. They'd pulled her military records, accessed her entire background. They probably knew more about her life than she remembered herself. That's correct, sir. Tell me why you were terminated. Sarah hesitated. This wasn't a conversation she wanted to have with a 3-star general while standing in a blood-soaked hangar. But something in Caldwell's expression told her this wasn't optional. I performed an unauthorized surgery on an uninsured homeless veteran, she said, keeping her voice steady. The hospital wanted to discharge him to a shelter. He had advanced sepsis. He would have died within 48 hours without intervention. I operated to save his life. I stayed 18 hours off the clock to monitor his recovery. The hospital considered it a liability and terminated my employment. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You were fired for saving a veteran's life. I was fired for violating hospital protocol and creating financial liability, sir. Potato, Caldwell's voice carried an edge now. What was the veteran's name? Joseph Patterson, Army 2 tour in Iraq. Caldwell made a note on something off-screen. And your employment was terminated this afternoon at approximately 1600 hours. Yes, sir. What are your immediate plans, doctor? Sarah almost laughed. Plans. She'd been unemployed for less than 6 hours, and 3 of those had been spent saving Colonel Reeves's life. I don't have any, sir. I suppose I'll be looking for a new position. St. Catherine's Hospital receives approximately $12 million annually in federal trauma center designation funding, Caldwell said, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. They also receive Department of Defense contracts for veteran care. I find it interesting that they would terminate a trauma surgeon for providing life-saving care to a veteran. Sarah felt her breath catch. Sir, I don't want special treatment. What happened to me isn't. Dr. Mitchell, you just performed a miracle in this hangar. You saved the life of one of our nation's most critical assets under impossible conditions with inadequate equipment and no advance notice. You were pulled from the street and thrown into a crisis, and you didn't flinch. You didn't hesitate. You did your job with a level of skill and dedication that frankly humbles me. Sarah didn't know what to say. The general's words hit her harder than she expected, and she felt her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't afford right now. You don't want special treatment, Caldwell continued. I respect that, but Dr. Mitchell, what you've done today, both for Specialist Patterson and for Colonel Reeves, is exactly the kind of medicine our military needs. The kind that puts the patient before the protocol, the mission before the margins. Sir, I appreciate that, but I'm going to make some calls, Caldwell said, cutting her off. St. Catherine's Hospital is going to receive a federal audit of their trauma center practices. They're going to be asked some very pointed questions about their treatment of veteran patients and their staffing decisions. What they do with that information is up to them. General, I'm also going to have my people reach out to you with some employment opportunities. Positions where your skills and your conscience would be assets rather than liabilities. You're under no obligation to accept any of them. But doctor, speaking personally, the military needs people like you. People who remember that saving lives is more important than saving money. Sarah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. After the day she'd had, after the humiliation and the fear and the impossible surgery, this 3-star general was treating her not like a problem or a liability, but like a hero. I don't know what to say, sir. Say you'll consider it, that's all I ask. Caldwell glanced at something off-screen. I need to brief the Joint Chiefs on this operation, but Dr. Mitchell, thank you. You gave us back a good man today, one we can't afford to lose. The screen went dark. Sarah stood in the sudden silence, Torres beside her. the weight of the conversation settling over her like a blanket. "He meant every word," Torres said quietly. "General Caldwell doesn't bullshit. If he says there will be opportunities, there will be opportunities." Sarah turned to look back at Colonel Reeves, still unconscious on the table, monitors beeping steadily. Rodriguez and Chen were adjusting his IV drips, checking his vitals, doing the thousand small things that kept a critical patient alive. She'd been fired this morning for doing exactly this, putting a patient's needs above institutional concerns. And now a general was offering her a future. 2 hours felt like 2 years. Sarah sat in a metal folding chair beside Colonel Reeves's bed, watching the monitors with the obsessive attention of a surgeon who just performed a miracle and didn't quite believe it would hold. Every beep of the heart monitor, every rise and fall of his chest, every number on the digital readout, she cataloged them all, searching for any sign of deterioration. BP 102/58, heart rate 76, O2 saturation 98%. Stable, still stable. Rodriguez had tried to convince her to rest, to step away, to let the team monitor Reeves while she recovered from the ordeal. She'd refused. This was her patient now. She'd put her hands inside his chest, held his heart, brought him back from death. She wasn't leaving until she knew, absolutely knew, that he would survive. The hangar had settled into a quieter rhythm. Most of the tactical team had deployed back to the field or taken up positions in the security perimeter. The medics rotated through checks every 15 minutes. Captain Torres remained nearby, making quiet phone calls, coordinating the next steps of whatever classified operation this was. Sarah's phone buzzed for the 100th time. She finally looked at it. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, most from her daughter Emma, each one more frantic than the last. "Mom, where are you? Dr. Chen said you just left. Are you okay? Mom, answer your phone. I'm calling the police. Please, please, please just tell me you're alive." Sarah's heart clenched. In the chaos of helicopters and surgery and dying patients, she'd forgotten the most important person in her life was probably losing her mind with worry. She stepped away from Reeves's bedside, moving to a quiet corner of the hangar. She dialed Emma's number. Her daughter answered before the first ring finished. "Mom, oh my God, where have you been? I've been calling for hours. Are you okay? What happened? Dr. Chen said you got fired and then you just disappeared and—" "Emma, breathe," Sarah said softly. "I'm okay, I'm safe. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner." "Where are you?" Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "What's going on?" Sarah looked around the hangar. The military equipment, the armed guards, the unconscious special operations colonel. How did she even begin to explain this? "I can't tell you exactly where I am or what I'm doing," she said carefully, "but I'm somewhere safe. I'm working. There was an emergency and they needed a surgeon and it's complicated, honey. You got fired this afternoon. How are you working?" "Like I said, complicated." Sarah rubbed her temples, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "Listen, I know today has been insane, I know you're worried, but I promise you I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Something unexpected happened. Something good." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Are you going to be okay? Like job-wise, money-wise, because I can take a semester off, I can get a job, I can." "Absolutely not." Sarah's voice was firm. "You are staying in school, you are finishing your degree, we'll figure out the rest, we always do." "But Mom—" "Emma," Sarah softened her tone, "today I got fired for doing what I thought was right. And then a few hours later I got a chance to do the exact same thing again, put a patient's life above everything else. And this time it mattered. It really, really mattered. I can't explain more than that right now. But trust me when I say that everything is going to work out." She heard her daughter sigh, that familiar sound of reluctant acceptance. "Okay, but you have to promise to call me tomorrow. Like, actually call, not text. I need to hear your voice and know you're really okay." I promise, I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Mom, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for that veteran patient. That took guts. Sarah's eyes burned with tears she'd been holding back all day. Thank you, baby. That means everything. After she hung up, Sarah allowed herself 30 seconds to cry quiet, releasing tears that washed away some of the day's trauma. Then she wiped her face, straightened her shoulders, and returned to Reeves's bedside. Rodriguez was adjusting the ventilator settings. His oxygen requirements are decreasing, he reported. His lungs are recovering faster than I expected. Doc, you did some seriously impressive work on that lung repair. Team effort, Sarah said, settling back into her chair. You kept him alive long enough for me to work. That's the hardest part. You're being modest. Rodriguez checked the chest tube output. Drainage is slowing down too. Minimal blood now, mostly serous fluid. That pericardial repair is holding perfectly. Sarah nodded, studying Reeves's face. He looked younger than his photo, the harsh lines of stress and command softened by unconsciousness. A scar traced along his jawline, another across his forehead. Old injuries, old battles. This man had survived so much, and today he'd almost not survived at all. Captain Torres briefed me on who he is, Rodriguez said quietly. What he does, the operations he runs. I figured out the basics. 3 prevented terror attacks in the last year. Chicago subway bombing, the plot against Lax, that thing in New York that never made the news. Rodriguez's voice carried profound respect. He saved thousands of lives, maybe tens of thousands, and today you saved him. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I was just doing my job. Your job that you didn't even have anymore, Rodriguez pointed out. You could have walked away, told Torres you weren't qualified, you weren't prepared, you didn't have the right credentials, but you didn't. You ran toward the problem. What else would I do? Let him die? A lot of people would have, Doc. A lot of people would have found a reason why it wasn't their responsibility. Rodriguez met her eyes. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you the kind of doctor people like him need. Before Sarah could respond, the monitors changed. Not dramatically, just a subtle shift. Heart rate increasing slightly, blood pressure ticking up, small muscle twitches in Reeves's hands. He's lightening, Sarah said immediately, moving closer, reducing the sedation. Started 10 minutes ago, Rodriguez confirmed. Standard protocol for post-op recovery. Sarah leaned over Reeves, checking his pupils with a penlight. Equal and reactive. Good sign. Colonel Reeves, can you hear me? If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. Nothing. She waited, watching. Sometimes the emergence from anesthesia was slow, the brain taking its time to reconnect with the body. Then a tiny movement. His right hand, just a flicker of his fingers. That's it, Sarah said encouragingly. You're doing great. You're in a safe location. You've been injured, but you're stable now. We've got you. Reeves's eyelids fluttered, once, twice. Then slowly, painfully, they cracked open. His eyes were gray, pale gray like winter sky. They moved unfocused, scanning the ceiling, the lights, before finally settling on Sarah's face. He tried to speak, but the endotracheal tube prevented it. His expression twisted with confusion and discomfort. Easy, Sarah said, her hand on his shoulder. Don't try to talk. You have a breathing tube. You were badly injured, shrapnel to the chest. You coded during surgery, but we got you back. You're going to be okay, but you need to stay calm and let us take care of you. Reeves's eyes sharpened, awareness flooding back. His hand moved to his chest, feeling the bandages, the tubes, the evidence of the surgery. You've been out for about 3 hours, Sarah continued. Your team got you here in time. Sergeant Rodriguez kept you alive in the field. Captain Torres coordinated the extraction. But right now, you need to focus on breathing and healing. Can you nod if you understand? A small, deliberate nod. Good. We're going to keep you sedated for a while longer, let your body recover. But you're past the worst of it. You're going to make it, Colonel." Something flickered in those gray eyes, recognition maybe or gratitude. His hand moved slightly, reaching toward her. Sarah took his hand, squeezing gently. "You're safe, rest now." Reeves's eyes closed again, but his hand held hers for a moment longer before relaxing into unconsciousness. Rodriguez increased the sedation, and the monitors settled back into their steady rhythm. "He's going to remember you," Rodriguez said quietly. "When he wakes up for real, he's going to want to thank you himself." Sarah looked at the unconscious colonel, this stranger she'd saved, whose survival might mean the difference between safety and catastrophe for countless people she'd never meet. "I don't need thanks," she said. "I just need him to live."